issues, scapular stability, poor glenohumeral range of motion. You know, these are all 12 factors that come into play. Some to me are a little bit more important than others. Like I already addressed one where exercise technique, I think, is a big one. Poor T-spine mobility is certainly an important one, especially if you're working with a population that sits in front of a computer for large portions of the day. Addressing their thoracic spine mobility is going to be a key component in shoulder health. And certainly programming balance. You know, later in this presentation, I'm going to go over a few programming strategies that I think are going to help you guys. But let's jump into a little bit of shoulder assessment. You know, when I ask people, should clients or athletes overhead press, you know, it's not necessarily a yes or no question. Like, it is part of human movement. Like, moving your arms overhead is part of the spectrum of movement. However, I've always championed the idea that people have to earn the right to overhead press. You know, they have to earn it, you know, based on their ability to flex your shoulder overhead. There's going to be, you know, we're going to get into the weeds on that in a few slides. But certainly when it comes to overhead mobility, there is a ton of anterior instability. So if someone doesn't have the requisite access to the range of motion, they're going to compensate in other areas of the body. And a lot of times it's going to compensate with forward head posture. They're going to compensate with a little anterior glide of the humeral head. They're going to get into lumbar extension. There's a litany of things that could go awry when we start getting overhead pressing, not to mention bicep tendon worries. But to me, like, overhead, the ability to assess it is pretty easy. This is something that I'm going to go into a little bit more further next week. I'm going to get further into the weeds of overhead mobility next week and the importance of that, because I think we're all interested in improving that in all of our clients, whether they're athletes or not. But certainly when we talk about the screen overpressing, you know, simply I just have someone stand there and I have them put their arms overhead and I try to see where they're moving from, and I also put them on the table. But we're going to get into that a little bit more next week. But I will say, when it does come to overhead pressing, like, there are certain user-friendly variations that I like, you know, with landmine presses, half kneeling, standing, tall kneeling. There's a ton of applicability to landmine. I call it safe overhead pressing, where people tend to stay out of the danger zone. They get to a certain degree of shoulder flexion where it's like, that doesn't feel great. I can keep them out of that danger zone and still give them a wonderful training effect, which as coaches, that's what we should be doing. Is there's a term that I've popularized. I stole it from Chris Chase, who's a strength and conditioning coach in the NBA. But this idea of the trainable menu. So someone comes in with a shoulder ouchie, for lack of a better term. It is important to find their trainable menu and find what they can do. Yes, their goal might be to overhead press again one day, but they're not ready for that today. So let's throw in some landmine variations. Other safer overhead exercises I like is one that I call tall kneeling to standing, bringing the weights overhead or even to shoulder height, and really locking in that rib cage, getting in that canister position, pelvis underneath the rib cage, and people working their way from a sitting position or a tall kneeling position to standing. To me, that would be more of like a safe overhead pressing variation. Not to mention, we can go into slow eccentrics, neutral grip. Neutral grip tends to be a little bit more shoulder friendly than having somebody go into more of a pronated grip or outward this position. So, you know, there's a lot of things to consider here. Another one that I like, short lever side plank with a kettlebell. Just get people in a modified side plank, holding a kettlebell, knuckles to the ceiling, and they're working on glenohumeral, internal, external rotation on a stable scapula. So to me, that was a wonderful introduction to safer overhead pressing. Same concept, side plank, modified side plank into a bottoms up kettlebell. If you want to be a real jerk to your clients, have them do bottoms up kettlebell presses. It's not a fun scenario for many parties, but here I'm just doing a plank hold. But then that can be progressed to the same screwdriver. It could be progressed to a press. A lot of cool things happen there. Not to mention, yes, doing bottoms up carries stuff like that with the kettlebell. So to me, those are great examples of you know, it's overhead pressing, but not really, but we're kind of working in the same area, but in a range of motion that they can control, and it allows them to work on a few things. Not to mention Turkish get-ups. Like I'm not going to break down the Turkish get-up here, but I do think it is a form of loaded yoga, to steal a term from Gray Cook. And you have to own every single position. So there's really no other exercise where people start in a lying supine position, go to a half rolling, half kneeling, standing, and then reversing that process, all the while working on hip mobility, scapular stability, T-spine rotation, just a lot of cool things happening with the Turkish get-up. And to me, it can be a very safe way of introducing overhead activities with your clients. But to get into this a little bit more into the conversation when it comes to shoulder impingement, there is an idea of internal impingement versus external impingement. So internal impingement, you really don't have to be worried about unless you're working with overhead athletes. I mean, I guess if you're working with office workers that go toss a football during the lunch break, maybe it'll come into play. But internal impingement is really segmented into the overhead athlete crowd. And basically, we're just talking about the supra and infraspinatus is getting pinned against that superior, posterior superior glenoid fossa inside the joint itself. You know, throwing a baseball is not a natural motion